Hi everyone, welcome to the TriEssence martial art channel. I hope everyone is still doing well. By well, I mean relatively well in the crisis we're living in. Right? I hope you guys are still maintaining your social distance. Keep hygiene, wear your mask, wear protection, don't go to crowded places. And so overall, just keep safe and keep healthy for the time being. And with that said, welcome to the 8th episode of Fact or Fiction, where we discuss various martial art lineages, stories, legend, myths, real claim, false claim, controversy, all that kind of stuff, right? It's basically a series of videos that I decided to make because of social distance and the inability to make practical videos with a partner, which is why I eventually came up with this idea. And so far, it seems that at least some of you are enjoying it, which give me more motivation to carry on making these videos until the crisis is over and I can go back to making practical videos. Of course, even then I might still keep making these videos, but maybe not on a weekly basis. Okay, so episode 8 is gonna be quite an important episode for myself, and I would assume it would be kind of anticipated by at least some of my viewers. In this episode, I'm going to discuss one of my own Taichi grandmaster. Right? I think 2 episodes ago, I already discussed Wu Tunan, which is also a Taichi grandmaster from my lineage, or from my master. However, Wu Tunan has less influence on my master and therefore my own Taichi than the master we're going to discuss today. If you've ever watched episode 6 on Wu Tunan, you will know that he wasn't exactly a good teacher and he was holding back secrets. So although my master was studying under him, but he didn't really get too much from him, right? Our lineage of Taichi pretty much, other than some conceptual ideas that my master might have gotten from Wu Tunan, our actual practice, understanding, and everything else come from my second Taichi grandmaster, which is the one we're here to discuss today. His name is Shi Ming. I'll quickly write his name here. Shi Ming. Okay, I hope you can see that the channel in a way. Shi Ming, like I hinted in the previous video, is quite a controversial character. Okay, he's not that well known in the West, but I think those who does know him or heard of him or seen him on YouTube or other video channels, they split into 2 groups, right? They either admire him and think that he's really, really good, or they think he's a complete fraud, like a fake chi master. So people are usually split in these 2 groups. And the ones who praise him almost become like a cult, and then the other ones are basically also like a cultish thing. And I think I've actually came across a video on YouTube a while back that that basically ranked the top 10 woo masters of the world. Woo, I believe, means like fake martial arts, like selling the kind of thing like selling snake oil, that kind of thing. And my grandmother Shi Ming was on that list. I think was actually towards the top. I can't remember the ranking exactly, but he's pretty much towards the top. And I gotta say, from a chronological viewpoint, he is probably, or he was one of the first to have videos of him doing these woo chi no touch kind of stuff on camera, and that was then later on posted onto the internet, right? And in more recent ages, we are more familiar with people like Yan Fang, right? She's like a female Tai Chi practitioner that went viral in China a couple of years ago, in a negative way. Basically, if you don't know, she was famously, she had a video of her controlling her students without touching and stuff. Video was uploaded onto the internet. It went viral. When actual reporters came with cameras to interview her and ask her to demonstrate, she couldn't do anything that could affect the report. The reporter simply didn't even move, never mind doing crazy bounces and jumps and fallings. And then therefore she became even more viral, but in a negative way. So in more recent age, when thinking about Wu master, Chi master, at least in China, everyone knows about Yan Fang. And in America, you have others. I'm sure I don't remember the names, but they are like America has its own no touch KO masters, who, fun enough, don't really come from Tai Chi, but come from other backgrounds. But chronologically speaking, Shi Ming is probably one of the first to have videos made of him doing these things, and was recorded on camera, put on video, and later put onto internet. It's just that in more recent era, his video is less popular, so a lot of people don't actually know about him. And without further ado, I'm gonna play a video that I think will give you guys a good understanding of what we're dealing here. Right? It's just in case those of you who don't know who he is, after watching this video, you have a much better idea.
The strangest thing David took me to see in China was here in Beijing at Purple Bamboo Park.
If you can believe that there is an energy called Qi flowing through the body, that it can be felt and manipulated, then perhaps you can see why some Chinese go one step further. They call this teacher Master Shi, and he tells his new students, come here every morning at dawn for 3 years, and then I'll know you're serious.
3 years? Right, and that's just the beginning?
Yes, but I'm warning you, Bill. What Master Shi claims he can do just doesn't look real.
What's going on here?
Master Shi will tell you he just used Qi to throw his student. This is where a lot of the Chinese stories come of all the martial art masters. They could emit energy, and it wasn't just their physical force that beat their opponents, it was their Qi.
But that goes against everything we know and understand in Western science. It defies the biophysical laws.
This is where Chinese medicine takes a wide turn off of what we understand and accept in the West.
我用的是和谐的办法，我给它合上。我这里是一个我，那是一个舌头，那分开。就是我的那个意念上那个地方去了。行。我的意念上那个去以后，我这个地方那个是我的实子，这是我的虚的，我这也不使劲儿。要产生这种状态。
对，这个不用力。
不用力，没有用力，太极不用力的。
对，没有抓我。我明白。
啊，
抓我的时候没有抓
我没有用力，我不是这么抓不动。这个我也告诉他，我是用那个思想，我的意念一动，我的意念是一种能量，一种东西在。
你做这个的时候，你有什么感觉？多说是热的感觉还是电的感觉？没有感觉。
没有感觉。
这没有感觉是什么？
太阳拉着地球转的时候，你有什么感觉呢？这个地磁场，你有什么感觉呢？你没有感觉的，因为它有一种平衡感。你别看老师隔着你打我，
来，
那就是你就他先退，然后你就帮他，实际上他就是对着。
I don't. Look at his hand. His hand trembles when he does that. Look, yeah, there it is.
Oh. 教上没有关系的，退不了啊。退不了呢，这样。这是够的。
Now, as an American student here studying this, what's happening?
What happens is, let's say, so I practice a lot of hard martial arts. I go in with my strength, and I push as hard as I can. And actually what happens is, his energy goes out of his body and into your body. So that you become sort of a marionette on strings. Where if he wants to all of a sudden jerk you with just energy, he doesn't have to move his hand. Suddenly every muscle in your body, every cell, expands or contracts.
But that defies all the biophysical laws as we in the West understand them. You don't emit energy. That's not the nature of things.
Well, I guess we have to advance our techniques of studying, because whether I want to believe it or not, I cannot affect him. I've studied a lot of hard martial arts. I can hurt people. I can do all sorts of things with my feet, my hands, and there's nothing I can do to him. And the harder I use muscles, the more muscle I use, boxing, taekwondo, the more violence is directed back at me. Not by him, but my own violence.
Try it one more time. Try to throw him. Millions of people are going to be watching, and I want to see you try to throw him. Really, this is for real. This is not a stunt.
No stunt, and I wouldn't be here to waste my time if it was a stunt. And we haven't done this in 2 years together, because the last time I did this with him, I got very hurt in my spine.
How long have you studied here?
I've been here now 4 years, studying with him every day. So if I can do what I'm doing now and affect him, upturn him, that means I've graduated to the next level and he would teach me something new.
All right, let's see.
So for me, it's very important that I do this, that I actually affect him.
All right, let's see it. Come on, Andrew, give it the old heave-ho.
Come on, Andrew, it doesn't look real.
So, you didn't do it.
No, not yet.
4 more years?
4 more years.
Alright, so as you can see, that video was made by an American, I believe, and we're gonna discuss about that video at a later point. In my previous videos, I sometimes make a video into part 1 and part 2, but that usually happens, after I record a full session, and then I realize, the video is very long and I cut it in half. But in this case, I'm actually planning to make 2 parts because there's just so much content that I'm gonna have to cover, and therefore it will not be uploaded at the same time. I'm most likely gonna be making part 1 this week and then part 2 next week. And in part 2, I'm going to discuss about the video you just saw and the practical side of Shi Ming's lineage. Today, we are going to first talk about the background and history of him. Okay, so as usual, I'm going to start by saying Shi Ming was born, I think, 1939. It's not really a matter of public record, but I believe it's either 1939 or 1940, around that age. And he was born in Shandong. Then he came to Beijing in 1949 and started doing Hao style and Wu style Taichi. Later on, he then became a student of Zhu Huaiyuan. Okay, Zhu Huaiyuan is the eldest and basically essentially the head disciple of Wang Yongquan. Okay, that is why we covered Wang Yongquan's lineage in the last episode, so that by now everyone will know more or less who is Wang Yongquan, what is his lineage, where his Taichi come from, and what he's all about. So Wang Yongquan's eldest disciple, right, the one who is almost like the head of his disciple, is called Zhu Huaiyuan. And Shi Ming studied Yang style Taichi under Zhu Huaiyuan. Now, there are many versions of the story thereafter, but what I'm gonna tell you is the version that's told by my own master, as well as other members of Shi Ming's lineage, which I believe is most likely to be, what actually happened, although there's no way to really prove it, because like I say, these things are not important to have official record, it's all just hearsay, but I think my version of the hearsay is probably more trustworthy than any other version out there, by anyone who's not directly related to Shi Ming's lineage. So basically, Shi Ming was training under Zhu Huaiyuan for quite some time, and at some point he hit a bottleneck, and he started to suspect that Zhu Huaiyuan was holding back. Now, this is a common practice in Chinese martial arts, for those of you who are not familiar. In my episode regarding Wu Tunan, we talk about this, as well as other episodes previously, so this is a common thing. Except that Shi Ming was not very happy with the state of his bottleneck, so what he did was he went behind Zhu Huaiyuan's back to visit Wang Yongquan directly, right? He went to Wang Yongquan's house. And they sat down, they had tea, they had a chat, and Shi Ming told Wang Yongquan what he came for. Wang Yongquan obviously don't want to jeopardize his own eldest disciple's position, right? Because if he starts teaching Shi Ming, that's actually bad for his own lineage, because his eldest disciple is usually one of the most important member of any lineage, the eldest disciple. So he's not going to jeopardize his position or or upset him. So he didn't officially teach Shi Ming anything. Okay. However, on the way out, well, I assume they had a pleasant conversation, and probably Wang Yongquan realized that Shi Ming is a very passionate and driven and motivated Taichi practitioner, and he's actually quite smart. I've heard this from more than one account, right? Wang Yongquan said so did Wang Peisheng, right? We're going to talk about that in a bit. Now, Shi Ming is pretty much agreed upon by many people to be a very smart person, in Taichi at least. We don't know how smart he is in other areas of life, but in Taichi he's said to be a very smart person. So I believe Wang Yongquan actually likes him, but he can't really teach him because of the Zhu Huayuan situation. So on the way out, right, as Shi Ming is leaving, it's a Chinese customary when you meet someone who's superior or elder to not let them walk you out, right? It's a Chinese custom to always walk out your guest. You walk your guest out of the front door, and sometimes you even walk them down the elevator together until they leave the main gate of the of the apartment building that you live in. So Wang Yongquan was walking Shi Ming out, and Shi Ming said, please, you don't have to walk me out. So he's basically holding out his hand to say, you don't have to walk me out. And they say that Wang Yongquan at that point touched Shi Ming's elbows, and Shi Ming basically not flew, but he basically went out of the front door without any resistance. It's almost like a hop, but not on a purpose hop. He just sort of went back out the front door. And at that point, something clicked in Shi Ming, and so he realized that Wang Yongquan can't teach him officially, openly, but did sort of give him a hint. And I know that this kind of sounds far-fetched, but so I'm not saying that it definitely happened, but based on what comes after this, it's kind of likely to happen this way. It's more likely to happen this way than not. And like I said in the last episode with Wang Yongquan, right, when you are receiving force in Taichi, especially if you already have some practice, some foundation, you have some sensitivity to body mechanics of the other person, then you can actually learn quite a bit when someone is applying force to you. You learn less if he's actually applying a violent force, trying to hurt you or send you flying, ramming against the wall. In those scenarios, you learn very little, because before you can actually register anything, you're already flying out, and and you hit something, and the pain, the impact, those things kind of divert your attention. But like I said in the last video, where Yang Shaohou used Wang Yongquan as a demonstration target, where he started to understand Yang Shaohou's method of generating power. It's a similar thing that happens here with Wang Yongquan and Shi Ming. So Wang Yongquan didn't use a violent force, but he used a kind of force that let Shi Ming realize something that he was missing in his own training. And it says that then he went back and he consolidated on the realization. He practiced on his own. And when he went back to Zhu Huayuan's training ground, right, usually you'll have like a park where the master come and teach the student. And he started doing push-hand with all the other fellow practitioners that's under Zhu Huayuan. Suddenly, Shi Ming was winning everyone else. And no one could understand why. Because they used to be on a similar level, like today he will be on the upper hand, and next day someone else will be. But all of a sudden, Shi Ming was leagues ahead of everyone else in that class or in that training session. And people couldn't understand why this is happening. So eventually, this kind of Zhu Huayuan caught wind of this. Now there are two versions of the story. The one is that Zhu Huayuan confronted Shi Ming, and they did the push-hand session, and Shi Ming came on top. I can't really say this really happened, especially this will kind of put Zhu Huayuan's reputation on the line. So I'm not going to comment on this. I don't know if this actually happened or it didn't happen. But either way, Zhu Huayuan expelled Shi Ming from his training. Okay, so that's how Shi Ming was basically excluded from Wang Yongquan lineage. Even though he actually learned Wang Yongquan lineage of Taichi, he was excluded. He was basically expelled, kicked out. And after that, he went on his own and he practiced some more. And then he started traveling between different parks in China and trying to visit different Taichi practitioner groups and see how well his skills fare. Now, the reason I said the part where Wang Yongquan hinted to Shi Ming is most likely true is because of the fact that Zhu Huayuan expelled him. Okay, if he didn't get something from Wang Yongquan, there would be very little to no reason for Zhu Huayuan to expel him. And if he didn't suddenly become a lot better, which start to kind of beg questionings from other fellow practitioners. So imagine this: Zhu Huayuan basically held back, and all his students are at a similar level. Suddenly, Shi Ming got better. And I'm sure, there's going to be stories of people who know he went to visit Wang Yongquan. So therefore, they would then also realize that Zhu Huayuan is holding back. And what this does is basically jeopardizes Zhu Huayuan's position, especially he actually makes a living, he charges his classes. And if this happens, then people will, not wanting to pay for his classes, and that basically ruins his, at least part of his economical income, right? I mean, he does have a day job too, as far as I remember. But it kind of messes with his potential income, which is why he would expel him. This would be the most logical reason why Zhu Huayuan expelled him. It's because it kind of messes with his, almost like a business. It's not really a business, but he's messing with his classes, so to speak. So if Wang Yongquan didn't hint to him, he didn't suddenly got better, I see no reason why Zhu Huayuan would expel him. And later on, he basically, as I said, went to different parks in Beijing and started doing push-hand with random Taichi groups. And that's where he started built up a reputation of being one of the top Taichi push-hand guys in all the parks, right? I have confirmed this with other sources of people who have crossed hands with Shi Ming, but are not part of our lineage. Of course, if I ask anybody in our lineage, they will say Shi Ming is really good, probably the best. But I've also asked other people who've met him, and someone who even claim to be friends of him, meaning they don't just met him once, they met him on multiple occasions, and not all of them really like him. Like the one guy that I spoke to, he actually don't like Shi Ming because he said Shi Ming was also very secretive, didn't want to tell him what he was doing wrong and things like that, which again is normal, right? Everyone has their own trade secret. It's like Kentucky not gonna reveal you his their secret Colonel Chicken recipe, so it's like that. But even though he didn't like Shi Ming because Shi Ming was holding back secret, not trying to help, didn't want to help him, but he did say that Shi Ming was like the best Taichi practitioner he's ever met or he's ever came across or crossed hands with. So there are many praises that I found when talking to people who met him back in the days. And eventually, after he was happy with his own abilities, he basically made sure that he is, among the top in the Beijing's parks. You got to know that back then, all the traditional martial artists, Taichi included, they practice in park. There's no official institute, so he can't go to a gym or he can't go to an institute and test his skill. He had to test them among practitioners in parks. Eventually, he came to Purple Bamboo Park, and he started teaching over there. And like I say in my second last episode on Wutunan, that's when a few students from Wutunan came over to Shi Ming from the Beijing planetarium, right, which is about 15-minute walk from the planetarium to the Purple Bamboo Park. And the people who came include Yang Jiacang, Huang Zhenghuan, Zhang Guojian, Zhang Zichen. The last one, Zhang Zichen, is my own Taichi master. So they became Shi Ming's first bunch of students, and Shi Ming really likes them because they actually already has foundation, right? When you first start teaching in a new place, what you want is to show result. You want to have a bunch of students that progresses fast and can prove that your training method works. Okay, so that's why Shi Ming particularly liked them, because they already had the foundation. Wutunan already taught them something. Wutunan just never told them how to put all the pieces together and was holding back vital pieces. So Shi Ming really liked them, and they became his key disciples. And I believe they started somewhere around 78 or 79. It is unclear exactly when. I don't remember exactly. Nor does my master. I guess it's been really long ago. It's between 78 and 79 where they all came to Shi Ming and start training in the Purple Bamboo Park. And by 1984, Shi Ming, officially, that's when he already built up quite a group of students. He's been there for a couple of years. When he had his first Bai Shi ceremony, right? That's when he officially makes the students become disciples. And over here, you can basically see a picture. Basically, this is a group photo taken on the day of their 拜师 ceremony, right? When the student becomes disciple and when the teacher becomes master. So this is basically everybody included there. And if you look in the middle, that is Shi Ming, and then right underneath or in front of Shi Ming, that's my master, Zhang Zichen, and right behind Shi Ming, that gentleman there is called Xiao Weijia. He's basically a half Russian, half Chinese. His father is a famous author in China, very, very famous actually. And yeah, so basically we'll talk about him in a bit. Just keep in mind he's like a half Russian, half Chinese, and he was also one of the. He came later, right? Not on the same time as my master, but he also was one of the important disciples, in particular because his father was such an important figure in Chinese literature. And Shi Ming likes to have disciples that are well educated, right? That kind of elevate his standard, right? He doesn't just want, barbaric brute. He wants people who are well educated. I think one of his rules was that, he only takes disciples who are college graduates. I can't really agree to that. That kind of prejudicial in some cases. But during those days, they kind of really valued education, right? It's like a whole social phenomenon that they really value college graduates. So at some point, Shi Ming actually said that people they need to at least have a college degree to be qualified to be his disciple. Not that you need to have a college degree to learn Taichi. He just kind of don't want people who are less educated. So I don't agree with that, but that's basically what he did. And basically what my own master, as well as his close Taichi brother, right? We're talking about basically Yang Jiacang, Zhang Guojian, and Huang Zhenhuan, right? They always kind of see each other as the most closest, and everyone else is sort of a bit more distant because they came together from Wu Tunan. For example, even in today's scenario, my master he chat with Zhang Guojian, right? Because they train in the same vicinity. And when something happened, with Huang Zhenhuan, my master get invited and he will go. But he almost doesn't socialize with the other members of Shi Ming's disciple or student, right? It's not that he's mean or he sees himself as better than everyone else. He's just not that sociable of a person. But even then, he has a more closer tie to the, Yang Haicang passed away very early on, so he's no longer in the picture. But he has a closer tie to Zhang Guojian and Huang Zhenhuan and anyone else in the system. So they kind of feel more closer to each other because they went through the same migration. And according to them, basically, upon coming under Shi Ming, after 1 year, they saw much more progress than they ever did under Wu Tunan. Of course, it could be that when you first started off, your progress is slower, right? If you have nothing and you started doing the first year, you almost don't feel much progression, especially in Taichi. It's very, very slow. But other than that, it's also because, like I said, Wu Tunan was holding back, and Shi Ming actually wants them to progress so they can prove that his method worked, right? But he doesn't have the same reputation as, say, Wu Tunan or Wang Yongquan, who has they have lineage reputations. Shi Ming being expelled from the Wang Yongquan lineage has nothing. He can't claim to teach Wang Yongquan lineage of Taichi, but he was expelled, so he has nothing other than show results. And he has a very strange way of teaching. Basically, we're going to talk about this more in the second episode, but we're going to cover a bit here. So basically, for the first year, and for even years after that, Shi Ming didn't let them do any form. They just let them do Wuji stance. This is not a norm or a common practice. I know for a fact that Wang Yongquan lineage does not emphasize on Wuji stance. So this is something that I believe Shi Ming invented on his own. So he heavily emphasized on Wuji stance. For the first year, my master, as well as Zhang Guojian, Yang Jiacang, Huang Zhenhuan, did nothing but stance. And keep in mind that with Wu Tunan, they're already doing forms, and over here they still have to go all the way back to the basic stance. They're not even allowed to move. However, after 1 year, they saw much more progress than they did with Wu Tunan for many years. And that's when they kind of strengthened their faith and belief in Shi Ming's method of teaching. Like I said, we're going to talk more about the practical side of things in the next part of this episode. So now we're going to talk a bit about Shi Ming's style, right? Because those of you, especially in the West, who knows about Shi Ming, you know him as the founder of Ru Yi Taichi. So for those of you who don't know, 如意 is basically like this. Okay, 如意. Now, 如意 in Chinese, it basically roughly translates to according to my will or bending to my will, right? When you say something 如意 means it happens exactly like I want it to happen. It happens exactly like I think it should happen. That's basically what 如意 means. So his lineage to a lot of outsiders, especially in the West and in China. When every year when I go back to train, we get people who come from other provinces and cities outside Beijing. They'll come to my master. They'll ask, "Oh, are you a disciple of Shi Ming?" My master will say, "Yeah." And they say, "Oh, does that mean you do 如意 Taichi?" So they all know this brand of 如意 Taichi. Okay. But actually, where does 如意 Taichi come from? It actually, okay, obviously he made the name because he was expelled from Wang Yongquan and he can't claim a lineage there. So he had to call it 如意 Taichi. But other than that, it actually comes from the fact that when he was younger, he did a style of Tongbei called 如意 Tongbei, right? There are no 如意 Taichi in history, but there is a 如意 Tongbei lineage. It's like a small side branch of Tongbei called 如意 Tongbei. So when he decided that he was expelled from Wang Yongquan, he got to find his own Taiji. He decided to use the name from his Tongbei practice and then call it 如意 Taichi. And you can see in the video here, right? It's an extract from the video I showed you earlier. Now these movements are actually Tongbei movements. They are not Taiji movements. Okay. So basically, at that time, Shi Ming is basically using some Tongbei movement, but he's actually teaching them Taichi quality. Okay, so although this movement, like this one, right, we call 迎面照镜 in 白猿 Tongbei, and we call it 单手 in 五行 Tongbei. Although this movement comes from Tongbei, but he's actually using the quality of motion, the mechanics, the principles are actually from Taiji. He's not actually teaching them Tongbei. So is this one, right? This is also, I think this is I'm not sure if this 白猿 Tongbei or 五行 Tongbei's hand. Well, it's from 如意 Tongbei from him, but I don't know which major lineage it came from. I think, yeah, this one does happen in 齐家 Tongbei, so it does fun. So I think it is in 五行 Tongbei. I just haven't done it yet. So this is another classical Tongbei motion, but again, he's actually doing with Taiji principles. And when I go back to China every year, I do see other disciples under Grandmaster Shi Ming who also are still in our vicinity. They're still training these motions. My master personally has pretty much let go of these things. He finds them as a distraction. So he make all of us only focus on Wuji stance, and then later on other principles that we practice one by one. But we no longer do these Tongbei motions. So the reason he does them, I would suspect, is that originally he needed more things to occupy the student, right? If you just teach them to do stance training, the hardcore ones are going to do it, but the others are going to not, they're going to go away. So to sustain the number of disciples, he's then basically had to introduce them some singular training. And Taiji is not very well known for having singular training. And that's why he pretty much took stuff from Ru Yi Tongbei. And I'm not saying that these exercises don't help, right? It does help. For example, Tongbei is very good for opening the shoulders and for relaxing the arms. So it does help. I'm not saying that it doesn't help. It's just that you don't need that to do Tai Chi. So he's doing it just because I would suspect that he needed some singular exercise to keep the student occupied. And he has a background in Ru Yi Tongbei, so that's why he did these exercises. And that also basically where the name comes from. However, after Grandmaster Shi Ming passed away in the year 2000, the students, his disciples, like my master Zhang Guojian, Zhang Guojian, Huang Zhenhuan, they basically stopped using the name Ru Yi Taichi for two reasons. So first of all, they actually feel that there's nothing unique about Shi Ming's Tai Chi, in the sense that all our foundational principles come from the Wang Yongquan lineage. Okay, basically, for example, the three circle, right? The Wang Yongquan lineage talk about three circle, we talk about three circle, exactly the same thing. Shoulder circle, waist circle, hip circle. along with other things, the center guideline principle training is exactly the same. There is nothing new. Okay. Of course, our emphasis on Wuji stance, all of that is unique. That was invented by Shi Ming, but but the foundational principles are the same. So they don't feel like this qualified to be a unique lineage of Taichi called Ruyi. Actually, once I was doing training in Pearl Bamboo Park, doing my stance, and Zhang Guojian, right, my Taichi uncle, came to chat with my own master. And I heard him say again that Zhang Guojian was recounting that one day when grandmother Shi Ming was still alive, he was telling him, you shouldn't make a new lineage, like a new lineage or branch or style. You need to have like a unique approach. You need to have like a complete system of like weapons, hands, this and that. You have to have a complete curriculum. We're just doing the Wang Yuquan stuff, right? So it's not good to make a new system. So he was basically disguising what happened in the past was my master. So that's one of the reasons why after grandmaster passed away, these disciples stopped using the name Ruyi Taiji. Another reason is actually because grandmaster Shi Ming's own son claimed the right to the name. Okay, basically, he didn't really practice when his father was alive. I mean, he came to the park onto my master here and there, but didn't really put in the effort. My master personally does not respect him as far as Taiji goes at all. But later on, he started seeing that his father, grandmother Shi Ming, was getting a lot of attention from foreigner. As you can see, there was like the American guy who came to videotape. At some point, there was also a French television station that came to Beijing to interview him and do a documentary. So there's a lot of foreign attention, and when back in the 80s and early 90s, when they're foreigner, they have money because foreigners are much wealthier than the Chinese at the time, and so that's when his son also wanted to have a piece of the pie. But obviously he didn't really train, so the other disciples didn't give me any respect or street cred, so to speak, at all. And when his father passed away, basically he just said, he's a son, so therefore he has a right to his father's lineage. And everyone else sort of just ignored him, and it's almost like a bully came to the playground, everyone else just leaves. So no one actually still in contact with him, no one really talked to him, no one care about what he does. And everyone else also just stopped using the name Ruyi, partially because they didn't think it was qualified in the first place, secondly because his son was using the name exclusively. So whenever someone comes to my master in these days and say, do you do Ruyi Taiji? And my master will say, no, I just do Taichi. There's only Taiji and there's not Taiji. There are no this Taiji or that Taiji. And then they will usually ask, but were you a disciple of Shi Ming? And my master will say yes, but he refused to use the name Ruyi Taiji. So by extension, if I see anyone using the name Ruyi Taiji, I would disagree with them too, and I would think they don't actually have a real connection to the key members of Shi Ming's practice, right? It's only the more outsiders who still think that that the group used the name Ruyi Taiji. And in more recent era, some of them has came up with another name, right? Instead of calling this lineage Ruyi Taiji, they call it Yang Shi Wang Mai Shi Men. Okay, this is kind of like a mouthful. So Yang Shi means is Yang family. Wang Mai means the Wang Yongquan lineage, right? In Chinese, we call it Wang Mai. Wang is his surname. Mai means a lineage. So it's Yang family, Wang lineage. Shi Men means taught by Shi being grandmaster Shi Ming, right? Men means gate or means origin. So basically, because it's undeniable fact that our Taiji basically came from Wang Yongquan's lineage, but because we were expelled, we can't really say we are Wang Yongquan lineage. So we are Wang Yongquan lineage subdivision Shi Ming's gate or his division, so to speak. And this basically also was possible to happen because after Shi Ming, grandmother Shi Ming passed away, one of the disciples of him, which is the half Russian, half Chinese guy we mentioned earlier, Xiao Weijia, okay, he basically somehow patched up the relationship with Zhu Huayuan's son, Zhu Chunxuan. Okay, Zhu Huayuan is basically the guy who expelled Shi Ming from the Wang Yongquan lineage, but his disciple, Xiao Weijia, somehow patched up the relationship with Zhu Chunxuan. They became friends. And he was then admitted back into the Wang Yongquan lineage. So I think at some point, Xiao Weijia was actually the secretary general of basically the head secretary of the Wang Yongquan lineage Taichi Association in Beijing. He went back to Wang lineage, but not everyone else felt the same way. Like my master, Zhang Guojian, etc. They don't feel like they want to go back. They don't deny the connection, but they don't want to go back to the Wang Quan Association. So therefore, they kept on their own. My master just called it Taichi. Zhang Guojian, I think, also still called it Taichi, but some other member, like this old lady called Wang Laoshi, don't know his actual full name, don't know her full name. I just know that everyone calls her Wang Laoshi. So basically, she's the one who started calling it Yang family, Wang lineage, and Shi division, Taichi. So although this is quite a mouthful, but I do think this describes the lineage the best. It basically describes exactly where it comes from much clearer than any other description. And over here, you can see basically a picture that was taken a couple years ago during Shi Ming, right? Shi Ming is basically a festival date in China where you go and you kind of you remember your ancestors, your people who passed away. So we'll typically go to the graveyard of the grandparent, parent, ancestors, and to offer flowers, to dust the tombstones, all of that. So this picture taken when all the key disciples came to Pearl Bamboo Park to basically have a remembrance of their master, grandmaster Shi Ming. There you can see basically, because if you're looking at if you're looking from your perspective on the right hand side, far right hand, that's my own master Zhang Zichen. So the one next to him is basically Wang Laoshi, the one I'm talking about. It's like an old lady, tiny old lady. The one next to her is Zhang Guojian, right, my master's elder Taichi brother. And the next to him is basically Xiao Weijia, right, the one that went back to Wang lineage and sort of patched up the conflict that was caused back in the days. And the one next to him, I don't really know who that is. And people standing on the back are all sort of involved, but they're not like key disciples, so they're not in the inner circle. But basically everyone standing there, there might be some tourists or bystanders, but a lot of them were involved one way or another with the Shi Ming lineage of Taichi. Okay, and when talking about Shi Ming, it's actually quite a funny story, because when I first heard about Shi Ming is when I was around 9 years old. I think either 8 or 9 years old. You see, for those of you that don't know, my father was a very dedicated Chinese martial artist back in his youth. He started training Baiyan Tongbei at the age of 11. Then he eventually moved on to many other styles. Eventually settled with Shaobei Quan. I think his early teens or late teens, I think about 18 or 21 when he started doing Shaobei Quan. And he was quite a well-connected and influential martial art figure in Beijing at the time. Right? He actually taught in the first ever official government-instituted Beijing Chinese martial art school. It's called Dongdan Wushu Guan. He basically taught there. He was one of the first bunch of people who teach there. So he's well connected with like all the important figures like Li Bingci, Meng Huifeng, all the he knows Wu Bin, right? The coach of Jet Li. He knows Jet Li in person as well. He's quite connected in the martial art world at the time, and he knows like a lot of the stuff that happens in the martial art world, right? If you're part of the community, you know what happens. And during those days, he has heard that a lot of people were giving praises to a guy in Pearl Bamboo Park called Shi Ming. In particular, Wu Bin, right? Basically one of the most powerful figure in the Beijing martial art government institute, right? He was the most powerful, and now he's still very influential. He's retired, but when he says something, people still get it done because that's how much influence he has. He's basically the coach for Jet Li, as well as many of the other wushu athletes at the time who won won gold medals in the national competitions and things. He's also the coach of Wu Bin. And a lot of them, eventually became movie stars, so that even gave him even more recognition. He's a very powerful man. So at the time, Wu Bin sorry, Wu Jing, what I'm trying to say, Wu Jing, right? He's also like an actor now, but he also used to be a wushu athlete under Wu Bin. So Wu Bin somehow came across Shi Ming. Some say they had a push and exchange. I'm not sure if actually that happened, but Wu Bin was very, very impressed with Shi Ming to such a point that he actually sent his own daughter to go study under Shi Ming for many years. I think she was there for either 8 or 9 years, and then things happened and she left. So basically, so Wu Bin was telling other people about Shi Ming, and one person he told to was one of his students called Tang Laiwei, who now resides in Australia. He has like a martial art organization that he teaches martial art. He's a very old friend of my dad. My dad knew him like since the early 80s. And every time Tang Laiwei come back to China, they still sit around and chat. Because over here you can see a photo of the one in the middle wearing white, bold, that's my dad, and then the one on the far right to your side wearing like a sky blue shirt, that's Tang Laiwei, right? He was also one of the male champion during the the 80s national wushu competition. He's a contemporary wushu practitioner. And and the one next to him dressing black is also they made Shaolin Temple together, but he's also a movie star. He passed away a couple of years ago. Very unfortunate. He's a very nice guy. And I'm on the far left. Oh yes, and the one next to my dad on the other side that's got like a mustache. He's also one of the champions. I think he was the Eagle Claw champion. Also from Beijing Shilahai Sport Academy under Wu Bin. He was Eagle Claw gold medalist and eventually also became a movie star. Anyway, so that's tracking. So Tang Laiwei is the one, on this photo is the one that actually told my dad, like, hey, Wu Bin was saying about this old guy in the program who his Taichi is superb. So my dad was curious, so he actually went there one day to see what's up. Now my dad is a very sensitive person in the sense that he was one of the first ones to go into the whole Qigong fever that happened in the early 80s in China, and he was doing a lot of weird Qigong at the time. Eventually he settled with Tibetan Buddhism, and eventually put his passion into religion rather than Qigong. But during those experiences, he became very sensitive to so to speak Qi, right? If you believe it, I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't. I'm not saying Qi is a real substance, but there are people who are sensitive to it, and there are people who are not sensitive to it. So my dad is sensitive to it, and so he went there. He didn't actually cross hands with Shi Ming. He sat opposite the training ground, and he just observed. And that's what he used to tell people that he went there, he observed, and he felt that there is definitely some energy exchange going on between those students. So he thinks that what happens over there is definitely real. And whenever he chat with other friends about martial arts, he always bring up that Shi Ming has one of the weirdest but very high level Taichi practice. So when I was around 8 or 9, I started hearing this. I was also very passionate about martial arts when I was a kid. My dad didn't want to teach me because I got into a fight a lot. He didn't want me to hurt people badly, because if you don't train, you get into a fight, the max you do is a bruise to the other guy, but if you train, maybe you hurt them even more, break something, and then we had to pay a lot of money, which we didn't have. So he didn't let me train, but I always want to hear him talking about martial art with other people. Even when we came to South Africa, whenever he meets a martial art enthusiast, they will have a long chat for hours, and then Shi Ming will always come up. So even then, I've kind of known about Shi Ming, funny enough, and my dad always regarded him as one of the best he's ever met. So I always thought, if one day when I grow older, I'm going to go back to China, I'm going to find him and learn his Tai Chi, right? That's always been my plan. And I was like, from 8 to maybe 12, 13, that's when I had this idea. And it's very funny because, I didn't expect this to actually at the time I did, but later on, well, when I went back to China after matriculation, so for those of you who are not from South Africa, it's basically when you finish your middle school, or high school is what we call it. It's 12 years of education from primary school to high school. After I finished that, before I went to college, I basically took 2 years break. I went back to Beijing and wanted to further improve my own martial art. And of course, one of the first things I want to do when I hit the ground is I'm going to look for Shi Ming and do his Tai Chi. And sadly, to my realization, Grandmaster Shi Ming passed away in the year 2000. So I was basically 3 years late. I went back 2003. So I was 3 years late. I couldn't find him. So I was asking like, okay, does he have any disciple that's really good that I can learn from? And then everyone said no, all his disciples sucks. So I didn't look further. I went to do other martial arts like Shaobei, chainstyle Taichi. Eventually I settled with Yiquan and the Ma family mentors and some other stuff along the way. Anyway, this video isn't about me. So that hope of mine from my childhood kind of broke. And then, funny enough, when I came back from that trip and I had college and life happening, but I was still training, around 2006, 07, I started to feel it was like, I have my own personal bottleneck. I have a blog. My Yiquan is not getting any better, and I don't know where to go anymore in training. And I couldn't leave South Africa to go back to China again when I was still in college. So I started trying to find my own cure. And I was doing external training like iron hand and iron arm and all of that thing, because I thought maybe that's the kind of stuff that you don't need a teacher to correct you every day, and it might give me what I'm missing. Maybe at a later point I'm going to talk about my experience with external conditioning, but it's not for this video. Anyway, so eventually I found that doesn't work. And then came 2018, and my dad wanted me to go back to China. They haven't seen me in many years. He actually left South Africa 2005. So 2008, he was already in China for 3 years, and he wanted me to go back. He haven't seen me in a long time. And I thought, okay, it's basically a good time to take a break, and also, to maybe follow up on internal martial art. At the time, I started to get more interested in internal martial art again. The external conditioning stuff didn't really work out to my expectations, so I thought, okay, let's do some internal stuff. So I went back to China and I started seeking internal masters again. And I basically went on the internet. I Googled, Baidu is no Google in China. I Baidu'd a bunch, had a couple of names. The first I went to is Tianfang. Right? I've talked about this in my podcast with Byron Jacob, but on Ocean you haven't watched that. Basically, my first target was a very old master that I saw on the internet called Tianfang. He's a Bagua master. Was 97 at the time, 2008, when I went to meet him. But he was too old to teach, so I had to look further. I had a few names on my list, like Zhu Chunxuan, right? I didn't even know about the connection. I just saw Zhu Chunxuan is a name is worth to look into, the son of Zhu Huaiyuan. That really didn't pan out. I couldn't get someone that knows him to introduce. See, the thing about Chinese martial art community, especially Taichi, is that if you just walk up to a master, it's very hard. You kind of have to have someone who knows him to introduce you for him to be willing to talk to you about anything serious. And then another name I was trying to look for is Zhu Datong, which also didn't pan out. There was a couple of more. Eventually, I thought I'll go on to wushuweb.com. It's a Chinese martial art forum in Chinese language at the time, a very popular one. And I was asking around, like, if I'm in Beijing, I'm going to do Taichi or some other internal martial art, where should I go? So there were a lot of, rubbish answers, like, I'll go to Wudang Mountain, or, go learn from Taoist priests, dumb stuff like that. One guy privately messaged me. He didn't respond to my post. He actually messaged me in private and said that if he was in Beijing himself, he would go to Peru Bamboo Park, Zizhu Yuan, look for either Da Zhang or Xiao Zhang, right? It means Big Zhang and Little Zhang. Those are the nicknames of Zhang Guojie and Zhang Zichen. So asking about the exact location, which is Ba Yixuan, that's the basic pavilion in the Peru Bamboo Park. And then the next morning, I basically went there around, I think, 9 o'clock. And when I went to Ba Yixuan, there was like a bunch of people. And, I was looking around. Eventually, I saw this old, semi-old man. He was like in his late 50s, or his middle 50s actually. When he looked like someone who, his eyes, he's got the focus of a Taichi master. So I went and I said, good morning, are you Da Zhang, or are you by any chance Da Zhang or Xiao Zhang? And he looked at me quite surprised, because, I don't think anyone comes there, asking for them by nickname. And he's like, well, what do you want? And I explained to him, I said, I come from South Africa, I'm really interested in learning Taichi. And then I asked online, and someone told me to come here to either find Da Zhang or Xiao Zhang, and they use, one of them, well, both are the best that there is in Beijing currently. And then And then he started, chatting with me a little bit, and then also, you 大张 or 小张, and he said, he's 小张, so that's 张子成. And we talked a bit, and then he told me, okay, you want to learn, you can come back tomorrow, and you stand in the corner there, and then we'll see about that. So the next day I came here around 8 o'clock, same pavilion. No, he wasn't there, and I don't know anyone else in his class. So I just stood there, standing upright. And I think around 9:30 or maybe 10 o'clock, so maybe 1.5 hours gone, he woke up behind me, and he said, okay, I can see you have some patience, but your stance is all wrong. And he started correcting me and telling me how to do a stance properly. And I think a couple of days later, someone else also came, also wanting to learn from him, and he didn't stand. When my master told him to come the next day, he stand for a little bit, and he sat down. And my master basically sent him away. So that's like his way of making sure that the newcomer is serious, because he didn't charge any money for training, so therefore he didn't want to waste his time. And then I started this, once I was there for like almost a month, and I started to know him a bit better. I started to ask questions. It's really weird to ask questions right off the bat. So after about a month of asking him questions, and then I was like, I heard from my father that Pro Bamboo Park there used to be a very good Taichi master called Shi Ming. And then he's like, yeah, that's his master, and that's how everything comes to a full circle, right? I came up to search on Shi Ming lineage in 2003, but funny enough, fate kind of took me back to exactly where I wanted to be when I was a kid, 5 years later. So I was quite surprised at how everything plays out. And basically that's how I eventually came in contact with, the Shi Ming lineage of Taichi. And I told him that, 2003 I came back and people say that, none of the Shi Ming disciples were any good. And my master, he also admits that, yes, Shi Ming kind of passed away untimely, and they were at a point of having a breakthrough, but they didn't quite have the breakthrough. So everyone was kind of held back and got stuck because the guideline was gone. It took him many, many years. Up until 2006 is when my master finally broke through the bottleneck and reached the next level. So he said if I came in 2003, I probably would not have been impressed with his abilities. So he was became only better around 2006, more or less around that time frame. So yeah, like I said, fate is kind of weird. It didn't let me go in 2003 because most likely I would have just thought, okay, Shi Ming lineage sucks. Let me come back when Shi Ming's disciple was actually at a stage where I would say, wow, this is really impressive. I want to do this. So funny how everything plays out. I mean, I don't really believe in fate, so to speak, but it's nothing else to describe it. It's like just the way things works out. It has its plans, so to speak. Okay, obviously this is another episode about myself or my own master. It's about Grandmaster Shi Ming, so we're not gonna go too much further into that. Oh yes, another thing, right? 2008, while I was there, I think the second month I was doing my stance practice, and I heard. I shouldn't be hearing other people talking, but when you first start off, you kind of get drifted off. And I heard someone with an American accent, obviously a foreigner, was telling his wife that he used to train here, and he was there with his wife and kids, and he was telling his wife that he used to come in the 80s and this and that. So after I did my session, I didn't break my session, of course. After I finished my session, and he was still there, luckily. So I went and I told him, I said, hey, are you Andrew? Basically, it's the guy that you saw in the video that I played earlier, the American student. Yeah, it's quite coincidental that he actually came to visit the park, and I had a little chat with him, like how was it training under Grandmaster Shi Ming, and then he was asking what I'm doing. And I told him I'm also doing Shi Ming's lineage of Taichi, and he asked who's my master, and I said he's over there in the pavilion, Zhang Zicheng, and he's like Xiao Zhang is one of Shi Ming's top disciples. So that's when I had the confirmation that I made the right choice. That my master wasn't just any disciple from Shi Ming, but one of the top disciples. Obviously, his skill already convinced me, but this is just to affirm that confirmation from another perspective. And I also talked to him a bit about his own training, and he's actually at the time studying Chinese medicine, and he said that he spent many years under Shi Ming, but it sort of didn't work out. He felt that it was not very tangible. Was his own word, and later on he joined a Bagua group, and he found that to be more tangible. So So I don't exactly know what went wrong with him, and Shi Ming's teaching, but what I heard from another source, it was basically, one day again I was doing stance training, and then there were people chatting right next to me because we don't have, like official training grounds. So while we're doing stance, people walk by or they sit on the chair next to us, and they do all kind of stuff. And just one day there happened to be, because I spend about 6 to 8 hours there every day, so I actually hear a lot of stuff. So this one day there was the old lady that you saw on the previous photograph, Wang Lao Shi, and another old man, I think they call him Cao Lao Shi. I don't know his full name. He's very, really old. He's 80s. He's also one of the Shi Ming's student. I don't think he's an official disciple. And then there was Zhang Guojian, right? Da Zhang, my own master's elder Taichi brother. So they were together. And Wang Lao Shi was basically telling Da Zhang, like, say, you guys were most lucky, right? Lao Shi, he referring to Shi Ming. He said, our teacher favored you and, my own master Zhang Guojian and, Huang Zhenhuan, Yang Jiacang way more than the rest of us. When we go ask a question, he just say, go and do your practice. Don't ask, just train. When you guys ask a question, he will explain to you, he will demonstrate to you, he will let you touch his body to show how it works, and then, and he will ask you, do you understand? So she was sort of like, she wasn't envious in a bad way, but she's basically saying that, they got more attention from Shi Ming than everyone else. And from that, I can basically, confirm my suspicion that basically Shi Ming, like every other martial art master, as to the Chinese custom, they have their favorites, right? The one that they want to teach really well, and then the others that they just sort of teach along the way, but they don't care that much about. So the four, Yang Jiacang, Huang Zhenhuan, Zhang Guojian, Zhang Zishen, they were among Shi Ming's favorites. There might be a few others, like the one you saw earlier on the video, the one that was dressed in blue and he was doing all the demonstration with Grandmaster Shi Ming. He was also one of his favorites, but later on he kind of went down another road and joined the cult and then stopped doing Taichi. Actually, Grandmaster Shi Ming went to his house asking him to come back to training, and then he refused. And years later, when Grandmaster Shi Ming passed away, and years after that, he kind of regretted and he came back to find my own master and wanting to catch up on the training he missed. But that's like another story. So, but the point is, the thing with Andrew that I suspect is basically he wasn't Shi Ming's favorite disciples among the favorites, so he didn't really teach him that dedicatedly. And of course, being a foreigner, there's also kind of language barrier. He does speak Chinese, but even then, there are alternative meanings of every word that you might not understand, and the cultural stuff. It's just very hard for him to actually understand what Shi Ming was saying, and probably Shi Ming wasn't trying his best to explain everything to him either. So as a result, he basically found the bagua that he was doing at the time way more tangible than what Shi Ming was teaching him. Either way, just an interesting side story of meeting one of Shi Ming's disciples, in real life and having like a face-to-face exchange. Okay, over here, I'm going to just show you a couple of photographs. So this is basically the pavilion we call Bai Yi Xuan. That's where Grandmaster Shi Ming used to teach, and that's basically what a typical training day looks like when it's not very crowded. Right, on Sundays it's very crowded, but on other days it's not so much. And you can see that everyone's sort of just scattered around. There's no organized class. Everyone just stay in their own spot and do their own training. Occasionally, you will see some of them discussing with each other about the experience or something. And over here you can see a picture of myself doing Wuji stance. That's what we do. It's basically a 2-hour per stance, and I do it 3 times, so it's a total of 6 hours. Take about like a half-hour break between each stance. And over here, it's a couple of pictures of my own master, basically, demonstrating some force to some of his top disciples, right? The one in the Jamaican hairstyle is called Guojian. The other one, you probably see on my channel's introduction to authentic Taichi is my Taichi brother Li Jian. So there's just some photos of them being demonstrated on by our master. And, unfortunately I don't have any more photographs of Shi Ming himself because I actually never met him in person. I was 3 years too late. So I just thought I'll show you these just to get you a big understanding of our his learning today. We're still training in the exact same location, and we still carry on the tradition, so to speak. And over here is basically a rock that is basically Shi Ming. Shi in Chinese means rock, and Ming means light or illuminate. And basically on this rock is basically found right in the middle, well, right next to the pavilion where we train. And it's basically a rock, and under it is written the character Ming. So basically this was carved by a very famous sculptor and artist and calligrapher in Beijing. His father is very famous, called Li Kuchan. Right? Li Kuchan was a very famous painter in the recent Chinese history. His son also studied Taichi under Shi Ming for some time, not like very dedicated, but out of curiosity and interest. So he went there for a while. He was also very impressed by grandmother Shi Ming's skills. So one day he came with rock carving tools and he carved the character Ming. Right, on the left there is a sun, on the right is a moon. That's what makes up the character. And together with the rock itself, it's basically hinting at Shi Ming. So basically it's like a mark to show that Shi Ming once taught in this location. Which is why, not the rock, but the fact that he taught there is why that this location is very important to us. And so even till this day, we still train at this location. Even though we have to fight over it with other people who want to do karaoke there, want to do dance there, want to do other stuff there, but we try our best to keep that location for old time's sake to Taichi practitioners under Shi Ming. Right, at some point it was actually just my master and his disciples, I haven't joined them at the time, who basically trained there, and then eventually other members of the lineage came back, like Zhang Guojian and this Wang Laoshi, and there's also a guy called Xiao Zhao. And a few others, they start to congregate there again. But for a good few years after Shi Ming passed away, so from year 2000, everyone kind of left. Around, I think 2004 is when my master started to teach there again, and around, I would say 2014 is when other members started to come back. When I first went there 2008, I only saw Zhang Guojian there, right, with my master. No one else was there. But when I went back again, either 2014 or 2015 is when other members also came back, like Wang Laoshi, Xiao Zhao, Lao Cao, and other people as well. So that's pretty much the state of our lineage at the moment. And lastly, here's just a picture of a typical gathering. So we'll train, especially on a Sunday, we'll train the whole day, and in the evening we'll go to my master's house. As you can see, it's quite small, and then we'll basically have dinner together and talk about Taichi, further teaching. That's typically how the Chinese, at least in Beijing, how the structure works, right? We'll train in the training ground, and we'll go back to his home, we'll eat dinner, and then we'll talk about Taichi, and then maybe train some more if he's, in a good mood. Anyway, so I think this will conclude our part 1, Fat and Fisher on my grandmaster Shi Ming. I know I haven't really covered the controversial part of him, the chi stuff, the energy projection, and all of that. I'll get to that in the second episode, as well as other clips of Shi Ming that you might have not seen before, right? And I'm gonna discuss the physical, the practical aspect of his lineage of Taichi. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe on YouTube channel if you haven't already, so you can get updated on the latest content that I upload. And if you can, please support me on Patreon. That will help me greatly, especially in this pandemic, and it will allow me to have more time dedicated to making video, to do research, and making the videos and do the editing, so that it will be at a better quality. So that will be greatly appreciated. And again, I want to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters. You guys are really great, and you're helping me to able to do to share my experience and my knowledge and my understanding to everyone else who are interested on the YouTube channel. And also, if you find these videos useful, please share them. I don't really have the time to promote my own channels, but if you know a friend who might be interested, please let them know about my channel. And lastly, everyone, stay healthy, stay safe, stay social distant from everyone else, and be patient, right? Thanks for watching TriEssence Martial Art channel, and I will see you next time.